Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I really and truly do appreciate that. Today we are um, um, today we are presenting the sensory brain and understanding how we process the world. So thank y'all for attending us with that. But first, I am pleased to introduce y'all to Miss Melinda Elliott. She will be providing us with information on Lacan. So I will give the floor to Miss Melinda. Go ahead, Miss Melinda.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so LACAN stands for Louisiana Citizens Advocacy Network. Hopefully, y'all can hear me. Um, we are a grassroots organization of moms and dads, people with disabilities, people that care about people with disabilities, and professionals that work on a legislative agenda every year. This year, our agenda is uh, an an alert similar to the Amber Alert or the Silver Alert for people with disabilities that wander or disappear or whatever. Research shows if you can get to them, if you can put things into place fast enough, you can recover them before they get hurt. Um, so we have a couple of bills in front of the legislature about that. We are working on money to fully fund Louisiana rehabilitative services. If you bring down the full federal match, then LRS, Louisiana Rehabilitative Services, can do so much more things around employment and even about around employment skills for um, kids still in high school. Um, we are working on getting some recurring funding for families, helping families. We got part of it last year. We're hoping to get the other part of it this year. And direct support workers. We're working on a increase for the rate as well as the direct support worker pay. Uh, we do this every year. Just looking a little bit ahead in the calendar, this summer I'm going to be looking for people that have ideas about things that need to be worked on. I'm always looking for people willing to tell their stories, and I'll help you put that together. Uh, Wallace usually drops the link for the to join in the chat. Wallace is wonderful, and it doesn't cost anything to join. It You're agreeing to get emails. I'm hoping you're going to take action on the emails, and I may even ask you about it sometimes. But I'm going to be hanging around during the webinar. Y'all can ask me questions in the chat if you need to or want to. Consider joining. Back to you, China.
Thank you so much, Miss Melinda. I appreciate that. Okay, so today we are pleased to welcome Ms. Vonda Flue. She is a guest from Lake Charles. She is an occupational therapy with CalCam Riding Center. Today she will be sharing her expert opinion on sensory integrations. We are pleased to have her here as always, Ms. Vonda. I really and truly do appreciate that. Please put your questions in the chat box. I will be monitoring that as well as Wallace. Wallace is always here to help, as always. I appreciate you, Wallace. Um, and after our webinar, Wallace will be assisting me in sending out the PowerPoint, the survey links, and the certificates, as always. So with that said, I ask that you give your full attention to Ms. Vonda and help me welcome her to the floor. So Ms. Vonda, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It is always such an honor to present and to work with you guys. I love what y'all do, and I've just been around and been so consistent for so many years, and I love referring people to you guys. So thank you for asking me, and I want to present my screen, and so I am going to start with the PowerPoint. I can get to it real quick, but again, my name is Vonda Flue. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been an OT for I think going on 33 years now, and worked in a variety of settings. That currently I am at Calcasieu Hospital and do inpatient, outpatient, and pediatrics. We have a therapeutic riding facility. So just wanted to share some thoughts with you. I'm going to go down to share my screen and we're going to start talking. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and tell me if that works. So we have that. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
We
good.
surely can.
Okay, so we're going to start out with the senses. And I know we're going to do some basic stuff in the beginning because it's going to help us hit the ground running toward the middle and the end of this webinar. So we all know typically we have 5 senses. And if you look at them, they're kind of the horse-shaped fashion on top. So there's the olfactory, your sense of smell; tactile, your sense of touch; auditory, sense of hearing; visual, sense of sight; and over on the left-hand side, middle, gustatory, which is sense of taste. But you have 3 others. And so there's vestibular, which is a sense of movement, balance, and spatial orientation; proprioception, which is a sense of body awareness and the strength needed to complete an action; and then interoception. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, the internal body systems for internal regulation. So this interoception is something that's kind of come out in full force a little bit new. It is, I'll read it for you real quick, often describes the eighth sense. It allows us to interpret things that are going on inside of our bodies. It helps us understand how we're feeling and allows us to take the appropriate actions to manage the emotion those feelings create. So it gives you 4 examples here. If our stomach growls, we eat. If our mouth feels dry, we drink. If our bladder is full, we use the bathroom. If we feel cold, we put a sweater on. But you can have some of this dysregulation here because sometimes kids don't know the difference between being hungry and being thirsty. Sometimes, unfortunately, as adults, we don't know the difference between being hungry and thirsty. There's a really good book. You're not sick, you're thirsty, and your body's many cries for water. And it talks about how we sometimes get those signals mixed up. And so there are times that we need to attend to, especially if it's a child, are they looking for, have they had enough water today and they really want a snack? And then there's this difference of, yes, let's use an adult in this example. I had a biscuit with jelly this morning. Why am I'm feeling really irritable at 9, but I had that at 7, but I'm feeling really irritable, and that's a long time till lunch. I've got 3 more hours, but I ate breakfast. Well, you ate simple carbs and some sugar. So your body got fed, but it didn't get a lot of good nutrition. So do we know the difference? So you kind of can make a habit of, especially in regards to food, like, do I have enough nutrition? Not when the last time I ate. And so there's a big difference, and we have to teach that to our kids. We had a scenario with my family member and a granddaughter, and we were able to look back and say, you know what? She's having a lot of meltdowns, but she really doesn't have a lot of good nutrition. We've been on the run, we've been doing this or that. I forgot the scenario, but she hasn't had nutrition. And you get a meltdown from a child who looks now non-compliant, but they're really just hungry or thirsty. And we all know that commercial, you're not yourself when you're hungry. So, there's the difference between those body regulations. Does a child play so long that by the time they have to go to the bathroom, it's too late? And so there's not this awareness of a full bladder or an empty bladder, and they're not noticing those signals. And so we want to look at that. That's a good one. And I'm going to go over just the other one's proprioception. So this is, this person knows where they are in space. I could not do this, but they know where their joints are in space. And if we had to look at the other side of this picture, which you actually see her elbow, they're in symmetry. but she's not looking at her hands and her elbow, but they're symmetrical. I mean, she may have in the beginning in this picture just to make it a beautiful picture, but typically we can put our joints in space and in position somewhere, and they're pretty symmetrical because that keeps us level, it keeps us balancing. So she has the vestibular organs in the inner ear that are sending information about where she is in space, but we also have these muscle spindles, they call down here on the bottom stretch receptors, and the skin, muscles, and joints that send information about the position of body parts. So if I hold my hand up and I close my eyes and I hold my hand up and I just have my pinky up, I should be able to hold the other arm up, stick my pinky up, and they should be equal in level of height and rotation or any type of thing like that because my joints send my body information. So this is proprioception. And so that's we'll talk about it a little bit later of the sense of why it's one of our major senses. So here is just a little picture. You have your muscle spindle and Golgi tendon organs that are sending feedback to the brain. So this is, crashing and kids that are getting all this input, or they don't have that input and they don't know where their joints are in space. They don't know where their body is in space. I have a child that I'm working with right now, and diagnosis is developmental delay, but it has been so interesting to watch as I've kind of guided him to go prone over like a little peanut ball and walk his hands out and hold and move his, one arm, doing something in one arm, holding his body, and how he positioned himself, and then go over to a couple of small scooter boards that are tied together and put himself on it. And sometimes he's not even all the way on it. He's all the way off to the side and he'll kind of tip off. And then sometimes his upper body's straight, but his lower body's not. And so sometimes he's way too forward. And I've watched him and worked with him to where when he gets on, he looks so much more symmetrical because he knows where he is. Now, he had some visual input from his eyes to look at the scooter board, but he didn't put his body in alignment with it until we practiced it a lot of times. So those are just they're receptors that give us feedback for our environment. So just understanding that this nervous system is a communication network. And when we have sensory processing or sensory integration problems, this processing and integration problem system is a little off, but you can see where it's talking about all these, and it's got 5 senses here, goes into, and then there's an output, but at the same time, remember there's an input. So this signal has this graphic is a little limited because remember the muscles are sending back information to the brain, but it's a communication network. So sometimes there's a communication problem and we've got to figure out for the child, where is that and what does it look like? So just to let you know, because of all of this, our brain takes in a lot of information, as you can see. We've got just 8 right here, senses. And if you think of tactile, the one in the middle and the pink in the upper middle, our skin is our largest organ of our body. Think how much information we get tactile, and we get it all simultaneously. If you're like me and you're sitting right now, 1 or 2 feet are touching on the ground. The backs of your thighs and your buttocks are touching the seat. Maybe your back of your torso is touching the back of the chair. You may be leaning on your arms. You may be fiddling with something in your hands. Like all of that information from one system is coming in. The wind from the AC may be blowing on your face or on your lower body, and you feel cold on part of your body or your whole body. Or you put a blanket on it, and now you have on your lap, and you have tactile information being sent from the front of your thighs. So that system by itself can bombard, because not only is input received, but it's also we can give input to someone else, and that gives us a whole bunch more. But input comes, as we can see, from both our external world and from our internal world, our own body. We want to know when our stomach is full so we can stop eating. We want to know when it's empty, but not when it's all the way empty. So the child's not having a meltdown because they're really, really, honestly, truly hungry because they've let it go too far. They didn't recognize the signals that they need some food, just like they would for drinking. So this was just another little graphic to show what our brain is having to process, and that we have different parts of our brain, and there's overlapping, I know that, but there's just, frontal lobe, thinking, memory, behavior, movement, parietal lobe, language, touch. There's all these parts of our brain that are working to filter in, to get input and to filter it. And I like this little graphic because You have, and it's only going to give the 5. I tried to look for one that gave the other ones, but couldn't find it necessarily. But it's really neat to see how really your senses all go through the thalamus, as you see in that kind of middle with the red letters. The thalamus is kind of the relay station. It tells us each sense where to go. So you see the red arrow from the eyes, and it sends it up to the primary visual cortex. The ears goes to the midbrain, the thalamus, and then it goes to the temporal lobe. So all those do that, except if you see down on the bottom, smell is the only sense that doesn't synapse in our thalamus first. It goes to the olfactory bulb, and then it goes down to the limbic system and the olfactory cortex. And the limbic system is where we store for our emotions. So I love the sense of smell, and I love how and why, how it's made and where it synapses, that it's different, and why we would propose that it's different, but what we can use it for in emotional regulation, because that's a powerful sensory system that look where it synapses in the limbic system for emotions. So I use that in treatment or the sense of smell. And I'll tell you some stories later if we have some time. I want to make sure we get to our stuff, but it's a powerful for emotions, as you can see from this graphic. It's the reason I show this graphic. It's because it's such an easy visual way to see that the smell is so different and where it synapses in the limbic lobe, which is our emotions. And here's another one. Just kind of gives you a visual of what's happening. So your tongue is the purple ones, and it goes and it synapses, and then there's that purple arrow to the gustatory cortex. And so you see all those, and they're color coordinated. So it's really neat. Now, the only one they don't show is the nose goes up and it goes to the olfactory cortex, but your limbic system is in the middle of your brain. I think that's also very important. I think that signifies something, just like it's protected from by the other lobes, just like our internal organs are for our body. So it's a powerful center. So sensory integration is integrating or organizing. So sometimes that term can throw you off. It's organizing all the sensory information we take in from the world every day, such as smell, touch, sight, sound, and movement. And then I didn't put in that we take in from our internal body. But it's our understanding of how the outside world, what we see, what we hear, and how it feels to get touched. It's that understanding of everything. And like I say, even just the tactile system alone is just amazing. So if you think about it, this is an occupational therapist that's kind of one of the pioneers in sensory integration, said basically everything we do requires sensory integration. This normal process can be missing or very badly organized in some people. And you see this sometimes particularly with children with autism. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but you also, I find it quite increasingly in kids that have NICU stays. Like their poor little sensory system is just so bombarded and so overwhelmed with sights and sounds that kept them alive. I'm grateful, but they're not the touch of mom and dad and bonding and those type things. They're in a very sterile environment with lots of noises and lots of they're got wires and tubes and all those kind of things. So that sometimes when they come, that's my primary thing to start working on. Yes, they're development delayed if they're development delayed, but I've got to get this nervous system, this whole sensory system calmed down, or it's just not going to stick as well. So I work a lot on the front end of bonding. I know that sounds weird, but I've got to get some sort of deep touch floods our body with dopamine, our feel-good chemical. So I have parents go back to even skin to skin with these infants when they've got them home, dad or mom. And I'm like, we need this calm and this peace so they can start moving forward in an organized manner with their whole body. And I had somebody actually probably less than a year ago come up to me and I've been almost 33 years in this field. So sometimes people come up and say, do you remember me? And I'm like, yes, kind of. Wait, give me a context. So, so she said, you came to my house and you told me, skin to skin and some other things. I don't remember all what I told her and what to do. And then the child comes up and they're 7, 8. So, maybe I don't know exact age. But anyways, she said, I thought you were crazy. And I told people, I think this is crazy. She said, but within days, I could see the difference. And so that's what it's so important that we recognize that we're not just looking for behavior. We're not just looking for an output. We're looking for how this whole body system works. Yes, we're looking for balance, but if they're so scattered, they're not going to be able to balance. They're not going to be able to do the things. They're not going to be able to tend to the environment to not fall over and trip because their sensory system is so out of whack. So I like this slide. Everything we do requires sensory integration. So here's just a really good slide when the input becomes overwhelming, and we see that. Then this is, as it says, I like it at the top, this is normal daily demands. So we'll go down the left side. Bright light gives me a headache. And we don't think of that very often. I was working at a school one time, and I went to the resource classroom, and I'd been there the year before. And when I opened the door, I was going to see if someone was in there I could start talking to about the students I had. I opened the door and I immediately just stopped dead in my tracks, and nobody was in the room. But the difference in that room, they had the little blue light filters over all of their fluorescent lights, and in them were like little turtles. And then they had like an aquarium, a little small aquarium, and you could hear the bubble in the background. And I mean, literally, when I opened that door, I just expected to walk into a regular door, but it stopped me dead in my tracks. And I just sat there and I went, wow. So they would bring kids who had needs and needed one-on-one to in that classroom, in that resource room, and work with them. Or if they had, some behavior or attention problems, they bring and work with them one-on-one or in small groups. And I applauded them. I said, thank you for making this an environment where they are maybe struggling in this classroom. And when you're struggling, behavior may not be that well, or you're going to go to sleep and whatever. You've got all these stressful demands, and you've got this place where it is nice and calm that we sometimes as adults have acclimated to. We don't think about the bright lights giving us a headache until, like me, I got glasses, reading glasses, and I put the blue light filter in, and it changed I didn't realize how much I was having kind of like headaches, but my head just didn't feel great, and I was straining by the glare on the screen. Now, thankfully, you can change that on your screen. The humming of lights are distracting. Again, we don't notice that sometimes as an adult because we know how to screen input and we know how to let that go. Right now in the room I'm in, it has the humming, but I don't notice it on the daily. But kids may. It may be extremely loud and they can't figure out how to filter that out. The kids breathing is annoying. Kids do stuff, they're sitting next to each other. And so we have that. We have people laughing and talking too loud. The kid next to me is too close. You go up to the top right, smell of materials is awful. Again, we have this smell component. So they, whatever it's glue that's being used in the classroom, or the teacher comes by and writes in a marker, and that marker smell. The seat is too hard, and they don't really know how to tell us. They're fidgeting. I mean, on a long vehicle ride, I know how and what's going on when I start weight shifting because I've been in one position too long. But they're asked to sit in that position, and they usually don't get to move, even from one cheek to the other. The clothes are irritating. The teacher's words are too fast and confusing. I can't listen and write at the same time. Man, that's a big one that we just assume that they're doing all of these things, and when they can't, they break down, and sometimes they're labeled a behavior problem when that's not necessarily the case. I'll tell you a child that had late elementary school, and they began to be labeled behavior, and we got to drill into the bottom of this, and their friends got to go to French immersion, but they didn't, and they were just told at those times, y'all were going to sit and read. Well, the child was struggling with reading, and so they just daydreamed because it was really hard to read the stories, but they didn't know how to say that. All they knew is, I don't want to do this work. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. French would be so much more interesting. I don't know why I have to read this story. So they look like a behavior problem, but it was a visual processing and reading problem. So we need to find out what is going on. And the sound of the bell is horrifying, and we don't know how often we have that bell, but it can catch some off guard. And that then releases a whole flood of cortisol in their system. So it's the stress hormone that gets released in their system because they're scared. So it's the same way as adults. When we get scared, someone, opens the door and scares us in a playful manner, or we didn't see them and then we get scared. That's a flood of cortisol, and that's a stress hormone. And then we have to deal with the outflow of that stress hormone that circulates in our body for a period of time after the stressor is gone. And we expect them to go back to normal. So they have, let's say the bell goes off, and then the then the kid next to him drops the book, and that scares them. And that's a little while later. And then, who knows what else happens, but they have these cumulative amounts of stress during the day, and we're expecting them to just process it all and be just fine. And some of them can't do that really well. So sensory processing disorder is a diagnosis. They say that most children with autism are going to have the sensory processing disorder, but not everybody with sensory processing disorder will have autism. And so the reason I split that out is because, sometimes the child is just not organizing and processing all of their senses, but they're handling life in some other ways. And I think that, I kind of sit in this category. I don't necessarily have SPD, but I have areas where I'm very sensitive. Very sensitive. I do not go down the cleaning aisle at the stores. I can't make it down there, with the headache or anything, or somebody with a lot of perfume on. I have, intolerances to those things. So I try to cope as much as I can. I bring things with me, and I bring tools with me, so that if that happens, like I went to a conference and I put my books down, walked away, came back, and the lady that was sitting right next to me had a lot of perfume on, and I was like, oh, I can't do this. Well, I had some oils and some things I could rub on and try to filter out that. I had tools. But what if these kids don't have tools? Have we taught them the tools, and have we taught them the language to say, this hurts? The smell is giving me a headache, or do they just melt down? And so, as a parent or as a therapist, our job is to find out if we can help them give language to some of the things they're feeling. So they can read over some of these. They're going to be on the slides you get at the end of the webinar, but they may cover their ears. Oops, excuse me. They may cover their ears when the sound is too loud, such as vacuum, hair dryers, may even scream or cry. And that's even looking at hair cutting. So there is somebody in the area that I know of, at least one person who has gone to a certification to cut hair for someone who is having sensory processing problems. And so, they're kind of those people, because this is very stressful. It's a very loud, odd sounding noise that's right up against their head and ears, and it's a cutting motion. So it can be scary for a lot of these kids. Issues with foods, gagging, can't be touched. I like this one, or can't be touched enough. I did early steps, and I went into a house one time, and the whole time the parents are telling me this child is bumping and crashing into everything, and all the things. And I was like, okay, he needs some pressure for them. They're like, we can't go anywhere. We can't go to church. Can't go to family functions. Like we don't know what to do, but he's just all over the place. And so we worked on giving him more input to where his body needed that for that period of time. And then guess what? He went on to pre-K and did much better. They went to family functions, and they even went to church. So we're just learning why. Instead of just saying, hey, that behavior is unacceptable, what's driving the behavior? Because we do this every day. We do this every day. Every day as adults, we wake up and there's something that happens, and we say, let's just say I need a cup of coffee. I need to get settled. I need this. I need that. And we go get it. So we're a bit better in tune with our body, but kids sometimes are not, and they just don't have language, and all they know is this is bad or this hurts. So in the middle to the right, may cry or get upset over clothing tags or textures. And I'll show you an example of something a little bit later, but we don't realize sometimes when we have a scratchy tag, we realize it, but we don't realize what's bothering them with that. So we can go through and ask them. We can put on different shirts and say, which one feels better? You know what? You didn't like that one. Can you tell me why maybe? And I may not at first, but you can give suggestions like, well, I'll say the slide later. Is this shirt too airy? Because we're thinking, hey, it's not tight. It's going to be good for them. But actually, it lets the cold air in because it's kind of a fluffy shirt on the bottom. So it lets cold air in, and they don't like that shirt. So we can give them suggestions to say what you like or don't like. And if they're nonverbal, we can start looking at other cues as to like or dislike. Or they can be nonverbal, and we can still let them point and pick it out and say, what's your favorite shirt to wear? Or these are the 3 options for what would be appropriate for today. Which one of these do you want to wear as we go out today? And so, schools sometimes have two colors. So you can wear this color or this color today. So you're giving them options and they can start picking out. And you're like, you know what? They always pick out this shirt. Let's see if it's the color. Let's see if it's the way it fits. Let's start doing some detective work here as to why they dislike other shirts that are great and are expensive or whatever. They're fabulous, we think, and they don't. And then the last one may be excessive risk takers crashing into things. We went over that, may have poor coordination. The bottom one may show little or no reaction to stimulation, even pain or extreme hot and cold or overreaction to pain, hot or cold. So that's the sensory processing. It's coming in, but the input is not feeling quite what we would call a normal feeling of it. It's feeling different. So maybe a light touch feels like scratching to them. So we have to find out. So this is a little triangle ladder light because it tells you that we're looking for organized behavior. That's the big one at the top. Tip of the iceberg, tip of, is what we talk about. And so we're looking for organized behavior, but there's all of these motor skills, perception, discrimination, arousal level. Are they even wanting to do it? Do they have the motivation to do it? And then registration of sensory information. So at the bottom of this triangle is where we're looking at. This is what we're trying to get to a more regulated and organized state. Now, the next slide. Oh, no, not this one. Not coming up. This one, I love this quote by Dr. Patty Shackelford. Often children who find controlling their movements difficult usually find controlling their emotions equally challenging. And I was just so listening to that when I heard it, and I thought, how true is that? So I remember working in a facility where the youth there had high trauma, just high trauma in so many different areas. And emotionally and behavior, it was all over the place. But yet when I profiled and looked at them from like a motor scale, a test that we would use, they usually always scored low. Even the ones that looked like the basketball star and they looked like they were super coordinated. You slowed them down and it was not good. And so think about that. If you can't, rely on your body because they're all over and they're just not sure, because think of their brain and how it's just all over, then you've got a system that's very volatile. So I worked a lot on their coordination and I got behavioral results. I wasn't looking at just controlling the behaviors because making yourself feel better when a lot more is going on than you know how to handle is not my goal. So I worked a lot on coordination. And like I say, a lot of behavior took care of itself, interestingly enough. So if you want to know, this is the slide I was looking for. If you want to know how an OT's brains work, this is an OT's brain. This is what I think of because I get those top of the triangle here, the red ones, a lot of times. I get behavioral or activities of daily living. They're not being able to do things. And so they're like, hey, is it a fine motor problem? And my brain is looking for that. But I've got to look further down and I got to keep going down to all the way to the bottom to the blue because that's where the pyramid's built on. And so I'll give you a couple of scenarios. So let's say I have someone in there referred and they just behavior, opposite ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. There's various, diagnoses, but basically having a lot of problems with behavior. So I'm going to look at things like attention center functions, and attending to a task, what about ability to screen input? So the classic one for this is the humming in the background of the AC that we've acclimated to, and we don't even know to ask them in the classroom if this is bothering them or at home. And for adults, it's a work environment. We have a machine that is so, so loud, but it's so interesting. The main time I notice it is when it shuts off. Like when it's going, every once in a while we'll go, man, that machine's loud. But when it turns off, several times we've looked at each other and went, wow, that thing was loud. But we had acclimated to it while we were working. So we didn't even pay attention to it. So that's something we have to look at. And that's even auditory. Like there's so many times they're trying to look at you, they're trying to hear you, and that those ears are registering everything. And what if I'm gonna play the scenario here because this is one of my favorite scenarios. What if they have one ear that's more active than the other? I'm not talking about necessarily a hearing loss. I'm talking about attention. And so I see this a lot of times. I have babies that come in developmental delay or NICU, and I notice they have a preference to one side. And so nobody else maybe has noticed it or other because it's something that seems very small. But I'm going to tell you what I feel like it rolls out to sometimes is that let's say this one ear is more active. And I'll give you a time that it happened with a baby first. I was holding the baby and the door to the nursery, and the toddlers, I guess, maybe the toddlers, and I was holding them, and the door was kind of off to my 45-degree angle to my left. So it's off to my left side, and the child is facing away from the door. And when they heard the mom, instead of taking the short turn to the left to find the mom at the door, they turned all the way to me and turned around to their right, a much larger, it wasn't 180, but a much larger arc of turning. And I looked at that child and I went to mom, and I learned, not in this scenario, but in other scenarios, that I don't work the church nursery anymore. It's just too much. And parents sometimes do not want unsolicited advice about how maybe the child is not absolutely perfect. And I'm just offering suggestions, but it's not always well received. But this mom and I were talking, and she came back, and I don't remember how long it was, and later said, yeah, he doesn't hear as well out of his left ear. And I was like, yeah, I could tell, because he shouldn't have spent that much energy. Now let's take that scenario forward. Let's take that child and moving to a grade level. So it's probably not going to show up in pre-K or kindergarten because they move a lot and they're in centers. But let's go to second or third grade, and the teacher just assigns that child who does not hear as well. They're very hypersensitive and hear a lot on their right side and don't hear a lot on their left side. And she positions that child, in the right-hand side of the classroom. Maybe not the far right, but let's say second row from the right. Number one, they're not as easily going to be in tune to the teacher. They're not. The teacher's on their left side. But what is on the right side is the door and another row of students. And they are constantly hearing, and just without even realizing, they're looking. Their pen moved. They saw it. They heard it. They scraped. They did their fingernails. They did something. They shuffled their feet. They did something happen. Oh, I heard somebody jiggle the door, but they didn't open it. That's constant stimuli on the right side. And guess what? They look like they're a behavior problem. They look like they're not listening in class, and they get lectured and told, and all these kind of things, and they're just trying to stay focused, but it's just way more attention on one side. So it doesn't look like it's a big deal when it's an infant, but I'm sitting here going, okay. Now actually I had a phone call from someone. They're like, they look to their right quite often, and I said, I've kind of noticed that. I was away, was out of town. I said, how about you do this? Every time you talk to that baby, get on their left side, stimulate that left ear. And I have another child, and I said, there's an older sibling, a few years older. I said, every time that child comes up, ask them to go on the left side. Just by say, come over here. You don't have to say it all and details, but come over to this, and you're holding the child looking straight, and they are looking, and even if they turn their face, that left ear is still being stimulated. You see what I'm saying? So we're getting input. We don't even let or give no stimulation to the right ear, but we give a lot more to that left. We do the same thing in this exact same scenario of adult stroke, and their sensors are off. And so I'm looking at all of these factors. So next slide says, when I'm looking at behavior at that red, I'm thinking of all of the things at the bottom, and it may not be all olfactory. It may, I want to make sure we know both sides of olfactory. There could be a noxious stimuli, someone having perfume or body cologne or something like that, that is not smelling good, but there also could be something that smells good. I mean, that's what smell is for. And it's like, I really, really love that smell. It's not a bad thing. It's a very good thing. It's good. Anyway, so I'm looking to what the visual, the auditory, vestibular, and proprioception, all of those things are doing. Like, are they just a typical leaner to the right side? And that's where all their stimuli is coming in. And that's where they notice more of their world. Can they figure out how to navigate so many things? So I'm looking at all of these things possibly from the bottom just to get that behavior of a certain way. Let's say it's activities of daily living. So let's say it's taking, I think I had the scenario set up so like they don't want to take a shower. I'm looking at postural adjustments. Like, can they do that? Like, a shower is a high risk of falls. So let's say they're a preteen, and you're like, you should be taking a shower. You should be able to do this. You should be getting out. And what if one time they had slipped and they caught themselves And it maybe happened more than once, but they didn't think to tell you. They caught themselves, but they're scared and they don't really adjust. And that posture is just not that great. What if they were, you know, just for whatever reason, they didn't get a lot of tummy time. So that core is not as strong as we think it is. We assume that it's strong enough for them to go take a shower. I mean, I climbed trees when I was little. We don't have that. We just have a different environment where it's more sedentary for our kids. So there is less that we don't think about. And so that postural adjustment, that postural security and stability, maybe they caught themselves, but they feel it and they've slipped off of, walking along the sidewalk on the little things at the cars in front of the cars. Can't think of what it's called, that stops your car. And they don't like those things. Like it's just different things in their environment they've picked up on. And so they don't want to go in there and do the shower. They're a refusal, it looks like, or they do it once a week or twice a week when you force them. And they look like it's problems with bathing or dressing. It has nothing to do with wanting to be clean. They just don't want to risk whatever's coming. So awareness of two sides of the body. Do they know how to shift right and left really well? And like I say, there's things that are there that we don't always think about. And as a parent, you're not always looking for those things. I know, but I'm just telling you, when it comes that diagnosis or those problems are brought up in my clinic, this is what I'm doing. I'm asking questions. I'm talking to the child. Then I'm putting them through some testing and say, where do I see something? Because sometimes it can be just behavior. It can be, but I find a lot of times that there's an underlying, sensory or sensory motor deficit. And once we fix that, we don't have the issues that we had. Now, they still don't want to take a shower one or times a week. Now we've learned behavior. That's not sensory. So visual, auditory, do they lift their leg enough to get over the side of the tub? Do they know how to stand on one leg in the shower so they can wash one foot and hold on? Do they know how to do that appropriately? Do they know how to let the soap all go away from washing other parts of their body before they pick one foot up and wash it? Just those simple little things like that. But if they can do it, is it steady? Is there vision? And I put auditory down here, but that goes back into vestibular proprioception, and my auditory is gone. Not sure where it happened, but so I just wanted you to see that this is what we're looking at. Okay, so I put it back clean right now. That is a beautiful representation of how I think. I'm looking for, is the system well grounded? Is it have a good firm foundation down here? Visual, a lot of times you can get things like, you can put color filters over their homework, their books, so that it's not tired. So for reading, because that does make a difference, and they can have some glasses too. So I wanted to say on this part of it, I can tell you all those things, but how do we help these areas without spending thousands of dollars on therapy? And how do we help our child, ourselves, or a family member without being an OT? Because I know this can seem very complex. So I wanted to give you some thoughts. And here it's the same lady, Lorna Jean King. People need to be re-educated to understand that behavior is always communication. It's always telling us something. People often use the word behavior to mean bad behavior. Often the child does not know any other way to tell us. And you can see, this is just sometimes what we're looking at is they're just screaming. They're just uncomfortable. But sometimes when we're uncomfortable, we figure out why. Like when I was uncomfortable with my eyes and my head kind of hurting, I thought, I don't know how it came to my mind, but blue light glasses, I got some and it was solved. Like we problem solve our uncomfortableness. Like I said, they just may not have the language and know how to tell us. It is our business to find out what the behavior is communicating. Often sensory sensitivities are actually painful, and the child's behavior is an attempt to escape. So this is the shirt I was referring to earlier. Look at it. It looks so nice and lovely. It's a little bit fluffy on the bottom. But what if that lets cold air in? I don't know, but you see what I'm saying? We just have to know what's going on with the child. And if they not even tell us, we got to be sleuths on this. Okay, so we want to reorganize and do some things for this. So again, what if the lights are too much and we can't change the lighting? What if we got, there's those Erlen's colored glasses or something? Or what if we got an overlay for them to put over their paper? Just something to help them to function. We've got to figure out some different ways. And that's where sometimes an OT comes in, or you get advice from a friend that says, hey, my child had this and this is what we did. But we can, maybe fix some of these things. And that's our job. Hopefully, get them enough time. Now, we may not have to make these accommodations forever. My goal is not necessarily that these accommodations are forever. Get enough of the sensory system calmed down so they can learn to work through some of them. But when you have them all screaming at you, it's really hard. So we just systematically work on some of them. We try to figure out which ones could make the most impact first, or sometimes which are the ones that are easiest to modify in the beginning. Either way. And so just trying to get that whole system calmed down so that we can kind of start making some headway there. Okay, so I want to say this, that because we know this in a trauma world, peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is internal. Removing the externals helps a lot, but externals can be turned off if we have the resources to do that. So, sometimes removing someone from a traumatic situation doesn't make the whole thing go back to a reset. They still have those things in them. I was talking about like the NICU babies. They're home. Everything should be fine. Well, it's not quite yet, and we're going to work on that because maybe all the bells and whistles and the lines are all gone and all those things and the sterile lights and the bright lights. But we've got to maybe still work on reorganizing that system. So we've still got to be purposeful. And again, I do not want, because probably early in my career, I will be vulnerable here. I had a lot to give parents, but they got a lot on their plate anyways. So I try to find the most simple, easiest ways to put something on them that's not this whole therapy regime. There was this really good book I read one time, and Miss Mama got so many people from her, I don't remember, I think it was church and all, and they worked 4 at a time on this child, and they did so much work, but that's exhausting. And sometimes you have other children you have to attend to. So I try to work my quote unquote therapy things to do into as much daily routine as I can. And there are some things I just can't, but we want to not just remove things, we want to help them cope because, kind of like the scenario of riding a bicycle. If they're afraid of it and you never let them do it, but you know what the joy is when they get to ride that bicycle, it's good stuff. And they are smiling and grinning from ear to ear. And you're so pleased that you worked through them learning to ride that bike. So we don't want to just remove that from them. So I'm going to give you a scenario. Hi, Vonda and Ken. I want you to know how the sensory activities have made a huge difference in him. He has had times of being escalated, and with the activities, he has been able to de-escalate and maintain. His therapy team does it similar to what you did at camp, Vonda, quietly, without anyone noticing. He now knows cognitively how it feels to be calm. That is a first ever in his life. Because of that, he is now asking for breaks more often and also asking for the activities. Wow, it was an incredible week with him starting to identify his own needs. This is a mom that's emailing me after I've gone to a camp in Idaho. And so I'm getting this thing. Praise the Lord, this is the first ever. He's also asking for it nightly too. Now we need to try and teach the school what to do. Like I get this email and I wasn't there. We were there for a basketball camp. I was with my husband and she comes up and starts talking to me and says, we've had an evaluation, but there's no one here to treat it. They can evaluate him, but can't treat. And I'm like, wait, what? I didn't understand. I didn't have like tons of knowledge way back then. And I said, I'll show you what I can. And I was able to go to their house and show her some activities and they had an aide. And it was just like getting this email. Whew, this is the stuff we work for. And we realize that these kids just don't know. Listen, he now knows cognitively how it feels to be calm. When I worked in a facility that was high trauma, they would say, hey, calm down. And the kid's response was, I am calm. Or it's more like, I am calm. They didn't know. But I had a sensory room there. And as I would bring them in and I would put them with the bubble tube in the background and the weighted blanket and the vibro rocker that was a kind of a chair that's a foam chair with a speaker in it. And we played this good music with some good bass because bass is calming. And they would sit there and learn to be calm. Then they started to recognize the difference. And the kids that didn't want to come in would soon meet me at the door and say, Miss Vonda, can you take me first? Like it was just fabulous because they had so much trauma. They didn't really know what it was like to be calm. So we assume these kids know. And I'm going to give you another example. I was trying to work with a kid and I was working some vestibular and they always had one foot in front of the other. And I was like, no, could you put your feet equal? And they moved their feet a little bit. And I was like, no, equal. Can you put them? Look at my feet. So I showed them my nice equal feet and they rearranged their feet and put the other foot in front of it, and they were still 1 foot in front of the other. And so we went back and forth with this just a few more times. I don't remember how many. And the child finally, who was probably at least 8 or 9 at the time, finally stops and says, Miss Vonda, I don't know what that word means, or I don't know what equal means. And I was like, okay, buddy, thank you for telling me. I'm so sorry. Miss Vonda just assumed you knew what it meant. This is what it means. And so sometimes they just don't know. And we don't know that they don't know. I just assumed he knew what equal meant. And at that point in his life, he had done so well, but had so many challenges. So he didn't understand the word equal. So listen, follow up. I think this is a follow-up email. M has had a great first semester. He's learned to cope with the census so much more. And the dots are the keys. That's one of the things I gave him. The best part is that teachers are using it. Off stage prior to our Christmas concert, I saw his teacher do a modified version of deep pressure on his shoulders and arms. It worked. It was the best concert ever. You would be so proud of him in baseball. His coach has each player play one position the entire game and then rotates so each player gets an opportunity at each position. He has played pitcher, catcher, first, and last night at second, all really well. He made 2 outs last night and a second and a home run. And now the kids are accepting him and he feels a part of the team. Like that's what we want. We want the parents, the caregivers, those who are just to be aware of an area that we just assume develops correctly and appropriately. And we don't know. I had a friend who, what did she say to me one day? She didn't know, I think it was like leaves on a tree because she had never known. She had never known. She got glasses and she went, oh, there's leaves on the tree. Like we don't know what we don't know. So once the sensory brain is more in alignment, listening, learning, and processing can occur. I also give you another case study of a child that I had, a youth, and they were, over the top behavior. And I actually talk about this in my upcoming book. And I basically, it's not on O.T. though. But I had a car wreck and I couldn't do a lot of the things I'd done. And so I had to go back to just basically this sensory reflex integration program for like 6 months, and I'd had the child for 6 months before that, and they made amazing gains. But this is where it really hit me. Because I just reorganized, I didn't have time for much else, and I actually switched them from twice a week to once every week. So I mean, it was like all the things were going against me helping this child because I couldn't physically meet the demands at that time. And so, but I went back to just hammering the basics as best as I could. And they made such improvement in coordination, some that I didn't even teach. Like the one of them said, I don't have to help him put his belt through all the loops. And I was like, I didn't even know that was a problem in the beginning. Like, who thinks to ask for that one? And so they were like, people, they don't spill their food and they can put it in the trash can appropriately. And then this shot actually went from basketball not being able to make buckets is what they said in the beginning to making 3-pointers and then eventually making the high school basketball team. Now that's an extreme success story. I do know, and I know we always have these 1 or 2, but it began to show me the value of what can happen when a system is organized and calm. We are made and wired for being inquisitive and learning. And if this is all just, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. That's just this classic line. And unfortunately, this is the hallmark of a sensory integration. A child that has sensory integration problems is they can sometimes achieve calm, but they cannot always maintain it. Like they don't really know how they got there. And you're like, you did it before. I've seen you do it before. And they're like, yeah, I did. And I was in there. I didn't know how to get back there again. Like they're really, truly, honestly, they did. Because with sensory processing challenges, 2 plus 2 is equal to so many different things. And you see my scenarios, 2 plus 2 is 5, 17, 794, negative 30. Sometimes it's 4, praise the Lord. Sometimes it's 2. Sometimes I don't even know what it equals. So they're doing these things and it just always seems to be different. And so they don't even know which one's correct. They don't even really know that 2 plus 2 is 4. Like their sensory processing problems present with a lot of variables that they're not able to control. So the limbic system is where we process emotions. The limbic system also governs our appetite, libido, sleep cycles, and bonding. If the limbic system gets thrown out of balance through too much stress, it can make regulating our appetites and our moods more difficult. When we lose the capacity to regulate our uncomfortable emotions ourselves, when too much uncontrollable stress makes it hard for us to find our own balance after an upset, We may turn to something outside of ourselves to soothe our frayed feelings. It's natural. And I put this slide in here because, yes, this is what the limbic system does. And this is what we know as adults. But as children, let's just put them in the scenario, they don't have a lot of options. They a lot of times don't get the freedom to go in the cabinet and get anything they want out of it. They don't have the option to go to the refrigerator and get anything out of it. Like they don't have the option maybe to go to bed at 4:30 when they're exhausted because we know they're going to sleep through the night. If they go to bed at 4:30, they're going to be up at 3. But they just have these things where they want to reach for something outside. So if we can make things available for them, I think I have it on here later, some things we can do. One of the simplest things a family can do is make the sensory corner or just someplace, doesn't have to be this big expensive thing. We have a little tent in one of our rooms and the kids just love it. It just looks like a little teepee. It's just a place where the world is kind of out of way. I even put up something and it was just half of not even whole half of on the tabletop. And they thought that was the best little hideaway in the world and the whole other side's exposed. But they just something about that, okay? So we reach for stuff, coffee, Snickers, all kinds of things. They don't have that option, so they don't know what to do until they just have a meltdown. So this is a mom from a group that I was in that says, hello, I want to comment on food intolerances and sensory integration. For the past 25 years, I've been researching and trying everything to help my children and I with food intolerances and ended up being stressed by all the diets. Each child had different intolerances and foods to buy, prepare, medicine, supplements to take at different times, etc. I was getting worse. I was getting worse. So I traced digestion backwards. To sum it up, what I discovered was it all came down to the nervous system being safe/calm. When we are in a state of fight or flight or freeze and the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, digestion stops. And as it takes about 24 hours to have the system fully recoup from the initial surge of hormones, that's stress hormones, most people live in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. Like this, every one of you probably know it. If you've got a lot of stress going on, you're like, I can't eat. I can't eat right now. There's just too much going on. We see that after a really big emotional upset of maybe a funeral. Like you're like, hey, you need to eat. And they're like, I'm not even hungry. So we know this. So if a child is living in some constant stress, then even digestion stops. But she discovered all of this stuff comes down to the nervous system being in a state of safe or calm. Because eventually it leads to being in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. Eventually it leads to a complete exhaustion of the nervous system. A balanced nervous system is able to respond when needed and not react to everything. Like this, her words were golden. Like that's exactly what it is. You can respond when needed and not react to everything. So how to help? This is kind of my thing that I do as an occupational therapist. Number one, just know it takes time. It takes time. It's kind of like turning the Titanic around. Like it's a big old ship, a cruise ship. It doesn't turn on a dime. It's going to take a large amount of time and a large area. So it's just being consistent in what you do and know that it's going to take time. Even if they achieve it 3 or 4 times, that doesn't mean it's maintained. There's times when I have goals that I'm written for a person, and just because they achieved it once, I don't put met next to the goal because I don't know that they've done it. But have they mastered it? Are they competent? Can they reproduce it? Can they replicate it? So it's going to take time. And involve other people, parents, teachers, caregivers, siblings, other professionals. Like this is a team approach. And there are other parents who may have similar problems. Find a group. Families Helping Families has a great resource. Like what else is out there? Sometimes you don't even know what you need. You didn't know that there was a certification you can do to cut hair for kids with sensory problems. And you didn't know there was a person out there that existed. You just suffered and had your kids suffer through the haircut because they need a haircut. Like, so you don't know, you can always ask around and look. And so I put this slide in there. Y'all can read this later as you get the PowerPoint, but there's some general calming activities. The internet is full of all this stuff. Like it's full. This is an old graphic I had. So just know that these things are out there. It does not have to be expensive. Just make it consistent and something they can easily get to and do. Sometimes you can give them break cards and they use these you can use these at school. You can use these at home. And they can say, because they're not going to have language to sit there if they're all stressed out and explain to you why they're upset, why they can't stay in the room, why they can't finish their meal, all that stuff. So for a while, you can make break cards. And then later, after the system has worked, we can say, hey, I know the break card, but I need to know a little bit more what's going on. So after they've had a calm system for a few weeks, several weeks, Then you start digging deeper as to why and what's happening. And pretty soon they're able to tell you and they don't need to hold up the break card. They even forgot to go get them before the meal to put them next to their plate. They just start telling you what's going on. And then pretty soon you notice they don't leave as often. They can work and process through things. So that's generally how. Then there's activities for an over responder. Again, you can find so many things, but there's just some that you can look at later. I just want to give you some tools, just minor. I know they are because there's so much, but and then these are two great books. They're older books, but it's great. The Out of Sync Child is fabulous. It's written by, if I remember correctly, a first grade teacher who had an OT come into her classroom and she just loved the idea. So the language, I recommend this book to parents a lot, even if a professional, if you're just not getting into this, because the language is written real easy to read. It's not a lot of therapy and medical jargon, terminology and stuff like that. And so there's also an Out of Sync Child Has Fun, which is what, and there's checklists in this book, The Out of Sync Child. And you can find out if your child has over responsive, under responsive, or it's tactile system that's off or whatever. And then it's a little checklist. So you can identify the needs, similar to I would do a sensory profile in my clinic. And then there's a companion book called The Out of Sync Child Has Fun, which I didn't get a picture of, but it's activities to help with those areas. And then a buffet of sensory interventions. Again, there's probably lots of things out there, but this is specifically for middle and high school students with autism spectrum disorders. So it's not just children. It's if you're a little bit older in this, not as a child. And then I wanted to give some practical examples to organize your senses. And I probably could sum it up in one word, nature. But I want to show you in these slides what is going on. So this is like I would be in my clinic simulating a balance beam and something. And look what they're doing. There's level ground or relatively level ground on one side of them. And where are the children turning, looking? Where did they go? They went to something that's fun and provided some of this for their bodies. And it's even better than my thing in my clinic that I had, my beam that I have them walk on, because this one has bark on it and you have to step over a log that's over there. I mean, it's like so much. But what I want you to see and what I want you to take away from the slide is that right now, that child, let's look at the child in the green shorts and do the other ones. Right now, there is this extreme amount of visual input. There's so much peripheral input and close input. They have to be looking down, which is convergence of the eyes. They have to use their visual system to their eyes to converge so they can see what they're stepping on and it's appropriate. But then they're going to look up and they're going to see their friends in the distance and their eyes are going to go into divergence, which is exactly what we do when we look at the board and our eyes are in divergence or in neutral and they're copying the words from the board and then they got to converge and write those words on the paper and on our desk. And so there's the same thing happening, but in this fun environment outside. The tactile system, there's air that's probably blowing or not, then there's sweat on their skin. I mean, either way, the tactile system is probably being stimulated. The vestibular and kinesthetic sense is being stimulated. But what I like a lot about this is binaural hearing is going on, two ears. So if there's a bird, it's not on the flat screen in front of you, it's behind you to your right. Like what if they want to locate that bird? What if, like literally yesterday, I walked outside and I could hear the airplane and I scanned the sky as far as I could see in front of me because I knew it wasn't behind me. I knew that. My ears told me that, but I could not see the airplane. And I'm like, it is here. It's here. It's here. It's here. And it finally took me a while because it was higher than I'm used to seeing a plane. And it was very, very, very small. But I was like, oh, there's my airplane. So my ears helped me locate where my eyes needed to look. And so also there's woods around them. What if there's sticks that are breaking? They're being like, hey, is that danger? Is that an animal? Is that a person? Is that my mom? Is someone walking over here on this side of me? So it happens in my right ear, or it happens where there's a bird behind me to the right and there's one in front of me to the left. Like you're getting sounds all around you. This is such a stimulating environment, but usually it's not too overwhelming. It's usually a very soft, soothing environment, but you do not realize how much learning is going on here. So even if it's not out in nature, the bottom right side, like that child, look at that. What if that kid probably, looking at the age of that kid, probably walks upright most of the time, but they have discerned through their senses that they have to squat down. Like there's rails and they're not using them. The other thing I want to say is, I want to throw this in, model it for them. That child may not even know what those rails are there for. Like seriously, I went with my granddaughter and she had no idea. But if you hold on, so you're like, hold on, you can do that. So that child might be able to stand upright and use the handrails. What if it's early morning, because it kind of looks like it, and their handrails and the steps are wet? That child is appropriately dropping down to feet, knees, and maybe some hands and are, getting that. And what are they touching? No, it's not a natural tree trunk, but it's cold metal and it's a surface. It is a little different, but it's still sending input into the brain. It's still organizing, and they're having to go up steps. So they're having to figure out how far to lift their feet. Like, it's such a great environment. Digging and in the dirt, like, it's just so underrated. We need lots of digging in the dirt, and just because their strength to pull up, and like my granddaughter did it one time, she put the spoon in the tote of beans that I had, and when she brought the spoon up, she had too much force and the beans went everywhere. But you know what she learned? I said, hey, can't pull up that hard. You got to do it softer. And so she learned a greater force, because if you pull up too much dirt in there, it's going to fly in your face. So you learn to grade your force. So that's that kinesthetic sense of how much force do I need? And just pouring something. Kids love pouring from one container to another, or dumping it out and filling it back in, because they're learning. This is a learning environment for them. And you can see that all the senses are stimulated except maybe taste, but taste is probably going to be stimulated, not because they put it in their mouth. They may, those saying God made dirt and dirt not hurt. They may put it in their mouth, but even the dust and the silt, there's going to be a component. We don't want it to be, but it might be there. It's not going to be primary sense. Praise the Lord. And then Orbeez are just the best thing ever. Orbeez are so good. They're this slick, kind of cool sensation. And how can you get, now again, you can't get taste in this one, but I have sometimes put a drop of peppermint in the Orbeez. It's in that cool water, or just in room temperature water with that peppermint, is invigorating. But what if you don't want that? You can put lavender. You can put something else in there. Don't put orange or citrus oils, it'll break the Orbeez down. So, but you can put something in there that gives the smell component to it, and it's great. It's fabulous. And so then we have a sensory, like, looks like shaving cream. Love shaving cream. If you're not certain if they're going to put it in their mouth, use Cool Whip. Again, you can grade this, and just the Cool It by itself is fantastic, and you can fill it on you. But then I put sprinkles in there, and they move it around, and the sprinkles eventually kind of dissolve, and then I can put some more sprinkles, or you can put coarse salt in there. And so they're getting not just the smooth surface, but now they have some tactile. And then guess what? Did it with my granddaughter, and she clapped her hands together, and it flew forward, it flew on her, it flew on me. And so we learned, hey, while we're using this, let's not clap as hard. You can put your hands together, but let's not clap them. See what happened? Now we have to clean that up. And it was funny. We laugh about it because that's a great thing to do, but she learned a greater force. So she's like, okay. So, but you know what? I don't want people to feel like it's always you have to set up some activity. Just being outside. Just being there, like I said earlier, does so much stimulation. Can you hear, you say you can hear a picture, you can hear the crunch of those leaves. I promise you, you can hear the crunch of those leaves right now in your head. Like, it's great. And look at that figure ground that's going on. Like, leaves are on the top, grass is on the bottom, like, and leaves are different colors and they're in different piles. Like, there's so much going on. And are they stepping on top of the leaves, or they're sliding their feet underneath? Like, there's so much input. Here they are running down the road, giggling and laughing. So it's just, you don't always have to have this setup of sensory stuff. Sometimes we know ourselves, going outside in a nice, calming environment, how much it does for us. It resets us. Even sometimes a step out at lunchtime, it's just great and resets us. And then this is a picture from our local to me of a state park, that where if your child is in a wheelchair and they need some assistance, you've got sometimes very big, large structures where you can go, and it's not always uneven ground where it's hard for the family member to push or to go through. So that's still good. There's this, can you hear the noise of the wheels going over those boards? Clunk, 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 clunk. It's such a stimulating environment still. And then what if a boat passes by? You're going to hear the boat in the distance. The sound's going to get louder and louder and louder and louder till it's right beside you. And then it's going to fade. So that we got this hearing that's 3D. And then what's the difference of a bird chirping on the other side of the river and the bird right next to you? It's just so beautiful for you organizing your sensory system. And yes, I wanted to show this picture. There's sidewalk chalk on the bottom, but if the child can't get down there, if they're in a wheelchair and they can't get to where they can do sidewalk chalk, Don't do graffiti. It's not what I'm asking. But if you have a home that has brick or someone allows you to, they can write on it, they can draw on it. And you know what? You can give them a sponge and they can erase it. Erasing it sometimes just as fun because kids love water. And they don't really know they're erasing it. They just know it's water and it's fun. And so if they don't like the feel of the chalk, some kids are just really sensitive and that feeling that chalk remnants on them, that stuff is just not really great. So then there's an adaptive for them not to touch it, but it's also in case their grasp is not well enough to move and manipulate that. And so it's easy to grasp. So it's got those textured ribs on it. And then blowing bubbles is absolutely fabulous. I mean, it is such a long exhale with sustained visual attention is very calming and organizing. So blowing bubbles is fantastic. And then they get to see them. They float. They don't drop to the ground like a leaf or something else. It's floating sometimes upward. So you get vision in the upper quadrant as well as the lower quadrant. And then playing in water, like I said, is so much fun. And then there's this tabletop. So if you can't get your child to where they're on the ground to be able to play in a bucket of water or something, there is this that literally just sits on the table. The water circulates in and out. So they can wash vegetables, fruits. There was all kinds of varieties. I just picked one picture. And so the water is self-contained inside this. So you can put it on your tabletop. So I wanted to just kind of start wrapping it up here. Our brain takes in a lot of information every second of every day from our senses. We learned this in the beginning. I want you to just kind of see it again. Input comes from both our external world and from our internal world, our own body. And processing it sometimes is a little off. And hopefully, we can start helping them move through life and we can have options to make that a little better. And if you can't, you know, and then there's occupational therapists or there's other people that you can consult. So, I mean, I wanted to end with the slide, like when the sensory inputs come in and they have an adaptive response when something's too loud and they're able to easily say, hey, can I move to the other side of the classroom? It's loud on that side because the door opens and closes because you've got someone that comes in and out to give you papers all the time. It's distracting. Can I move to the other side of the classroom? There's a win there, that we've got some sort of way the child is adapting and the adult. Like I say, I have to adapt to things that are not always so what I want and maybe an irritant to me or give me a headache or something, and I have to adapt. And so that's what I want. So we are at the end of our end of our presentation. And if you have any questions or comments, let me know. I'll quit sharing my screen. Okay.
I am looking over the chat. Let's see. Okay. So one of them says, let's see, we are stimulated. Weak ears.
Oh, I see that question
Strong
too.
ears. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm usually stimulating the not as attentive ear, the ear that's not as stimulated. So I'm stimulating what we call, I guess, the weak ear. So I'm getting more and more input to it so that the body recognizes, hey, there's stuff on the left-hand side of my body. Because that would be a balance issue too. If they don't see something and they don't move their head to the left as often, and there's something that they may trip over. So we want that stimulation on the side that's not as responsive.
Can you explain motor planning in the green section?
Yeah, green section, green section, green. Well, motor planning, I'm not sure the green section, but that's okay. Motor
It's
planning is
probably the green section in your slide. Maybe one of the slides had green on it and it had
yeah,
motor
that's
planning.
what I was thinking. The one I was thinking about had motor planning was blue on my end, but motor planning is the ability to process. So let's say putting on pants. Like I'm motor plan in advance. In my mind, I'm thinking ahead. I don't realize it, but I'm like, I've got to move weight to one side and I've got to pick up one leg. And so I'm planning out my movements, my motor movements, and then I'm going to put it on. I'm going to keep that leg suspended till I get the bottom of it over my foot. And then I'm going to put that foot down. So it's planning forward and knowing what to do. I have a baby and they can move their arms in and out, but they're not motor planning how to move that arm out to put a shirt on. So I hope that helps. But it's kind of a planning process of how we're going to do things. So that when we learn from that, so that we're not, trying to figure everything out every time we do it.
Or Are there any tools to help an adult be able to wash the bottom of their feet?
Um, I would say like if the balance, you think, or getting to them. Sometimes a shower chair is
Yeah.
available, a grab bar is available. What I advise some people sometimes is the parts that may be a little bit difficult and you don't want to risk washing when you're in the shower and moving around and maybe slipping, is you wash that body part outside ahead of time, like get a little tub and a basin of water and wash the feet ahead of time so you don't have to lift them. I know that's a little bit cumbersome and it's an extra step, but we definitely don't want falls in the shower. So there's one.
Okay. Can we talk about the whole body? Is it a proxic?
Full body apraxia.
APRAXIA?
Um, yeah, I mean, I have a child who's had some of that, and I did a lot of reflex integration work, ATNR and STNR, just to get that trunk in alignment and get that trunk strong, and then started working the visual and hearing off of that strong trunk so that some of those movements, they calmed down. Some of them did. And once the core was steadier, even the head started not moving as much. So I really work on core a lot. That seems to help because it's that old thing, core proximal distal proximal stability before distal mobility, and so we've got to have that core stable. So I try to do that, and you can look at reflexes because is there a reason they kind of always do a certain movement pattern because those reflexes weren't integrated in the beginning. And I know reflex kind of has a different side to it, but I've seen really good results with working those, especially those spinal reflexes that keep your body in alignment and keep you feeling safe and secure and solid and stable so that you can move forward and do fun and different things. So,
Okay. Let's see. I was checking to see if we have any others. This was a wonderful webinar, awesome webinar. Let's see. This was very informative. Thanks so much for the information.
oh, I do see motor planning in the green part of the triangle. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully I answered that question well. I do see it.
Someone was asking. No, you don't have to raise your hand. You just have to write in the chat. Somebody was asking if they had to raise their hand.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else? Any other questions? Let's see. Now is the time to ask. Great presentation, very informative. Love the delivery and case studies.
Thank you. Those are always so helpful.
Yeah, I love when you tell the different stories. It's good to be able to hear from, the different families and get all the information from them and,
Yeah.
Get all the feedback. That's good. Allison said, we can tell that you love what you do.
It's so much fun to problem solve. I mean, it's just like you just have an inquisitive brain, but I just believe that most of the time there's something that they need help with, and they just don't know how to tell us all the time, you know?
Yeah.
My poor child that didn't know equal, and I'm saying, buddy, put your feet equal. He was trying so hard. He'd rearrange his feet. He'd rearrange feet. He was doing something. He just didn't know exactly what to do. And I will say this, if some of them are still on, modeling and do it with your kids. Like sometimes I tell my students, like you you're wanting them to string the beads a certain way, but they don't know how. And instead of verbally correcting, why don't you just model it for them and let them see it? So modeling's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for oral health care?
Um, when I do that, and I have parents that say they won't brush their teeth at all, we start with various things. Like I start away from the mouth, so I stimulate and do stuff on the face and the neck, and I don't get near the mouth. Like, because if you're diving in, you're just going to get this hands up response. So I start, because your tactile system is, inside your mouth as well. And so I start with the head and I start with that, and we get a lot of stuff so that not every time I'm diving toward their face, I'm in their mouth. So I start with all of that. And then I eventually work my way in closer and closer, and I do it with various things, a cloth, not a toothbrush, and I do other tactile, and I let them do it. And then this one is a really good one, like I was saying just a minute ago. I let them do it to my face. And they see that my face isn't panicking. And they see that I'm not doing that. So they do it all to my face. And then we get the toothbrush and we can practice on teeth that are like a play set. And we can brush together and we can put different things on the thing. We can put toothpaste on it if we want to and put on the plastic set and then we rinse it off and do those things. So we just gradually build up to eventually. And then we start out with letting them brush my teeth. So it's not their toothbrush. So mom and them bring a toothbrush from home. And I get my toothbrush and I put my toothpaste on it and they brush my teeth. And then I brush with them. I say, okay, we have to do it 5 seconds. We have to do it 10. And I brush with them instead of just looking at them the whole time. I brush with them and they watch. And it's funny because they're like, oh, I turned my hand to go this way. And they're not jabbing. I go slow. I do not use the same speed I normally brush with. I go very slow because they're not able to do all that. And then we work up and I have a visual timer. So they know it's 30 seconds. I just need to do 30 seconds. And then sometimes I say 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10. So we at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So we're at a minute, and then I just vary it from there. But so that's kind of how I've worked it, is that.
Right. Yeah. I've heard that typically works, but if you start at a slow pace, that it really and truly does work.
Yeah. And like I
It
say,
takes some time, but
takes
it
some
works.
time. I put that on the slide. It takes time.
Yes, it
And don't
takes
even get near
time,
their mouth. Don't talk about
but
it.
it works.
It works. Good. So, and I mean, I know it's a little while without oral care, but if you can just get past that hump somehow, the slower you go, sometimes the faster it'll come.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I did hear
yeah.
that. Okay. Any others? She says she appreciate the input.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, I would like to thank Ms. Vonda for all the good information. I know that it was useful to the families and the professionals that we serve. I would like to thank Wallace for assisting me as always. Oh God, I thank you, Wallace. And Miss Melinda, I thank you so much for y'all assisting me as always.
Yes. Yeah.
Wallace will be sending out the PowerPoint information and the survey link along with the certificates as soon as we are done with all of our with the webinar. I appreciate everyone for taking the time out of your day to participate in this webinar with us. Whenever you have a moment, if you want to take some time out, you can check out our website and our Facebook. We have a listing of some of our upcoming webinars. You can register for them. They are free. We also have an inclusive prom coming up if that's something that y'all interested in or know of anyone that may be interested in doing so. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. We really and truly do appreciate it. And I really and truly do appreciate you, Ms. Vonda. With all the love. Thank y'all so much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.